Hi everyone. My name is Shu-Ling Chua, and I'm like the very informal chair of today's session, Seizing the Means of Publishing. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I am joining you all today from the land of the people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respect to elders past, present, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. So I'll just introduce myself very briefly and then pass on to someone else. So I am a essayist, sometimes critic, sometimes poet, and I am very interested in writing about pop music and visual art currently. And oh yes, my star sign is Aries Sun and Leo Rising, Leo Moon. I'm going to hand over to Rafeif. Also, this panel is full of people I really, really admire and love, so this is just going to be fangirling all around.
Ditto on the fangirling. Hi everyone, my name is Rafeif Ismail. I would like to pay my respects to the Wajak Noongar people on whose land I'm broadcasting from, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. My star signs are Leo Sun, Virgo Rising, Aquarius Moon, which is hectic. And I'm a writer, screenwriter, theatre writer. Sometimes I dabble in music, just do a bit of everything, I guess. Yeah, my current interest is working on speculative fiction, especially like Afro-Black speculative fiction. Aline, what about you?
Hello, my name is Aline-Mwezi Niyonsenga, and I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the land of the Ngunnawal people, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Sovereignty was never ceded. Right, my star signs. I'm a Scorpio sun, Aries moon, and Gemini rising. I've been told that's very chaotic. And I'm a writer of speculative fiction, but you'll notice that I also just write short stories that aren't that speculative. And I'm interested in exploring ideas of cultural identity in my writing and adding in pieces of Rwandan folklore in what I write. Passing on to Cindy, sorry.
Okay. I'm Cindy. I'm broadcasting today from Wurundjeri country in northern Nam in Melbourne. I am a poet and writer and director for theatre and film, sort of mostly focusing on like experimental work. Like my area of interest is generally experimental physical theatre. My star signs I'm a Sagittarius sun, a Capricorn moon, and Aquarius rising. And I've never felt more red than when I saw my birth chart for the first time, which is probably a good thing. And a brief visual description of me is that I am a light-skinned East Asian person with dark hair tied back and in a fringe, and I'm wearing a navy top against a white background.
My visual description, this is Shu-Ling speaking again. My visual description is that I have shoulder length dark black hair, and I'm wearing like a yellow floral jumpsuit. Behind me is a bookshelf and a red curtain. You want to jump back in, Rafeif?
Yep. I'm a Black person with long silver and purple hair. I am in a background of white bookshelves with a ton of books in Arabic.
Yep, Aline speaking. Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, I was just...
Okay. I'll go with my description. I'm also, it's Aline speaking. I'm also a Black person with big poofy hair, floral shirts, and white background.
Thank you all for your introductions. This is a huge topic, and we all kind of write across genres and across forms and have been guess, in the industry for a few years. I guess we just thought, one of the, well, jumping off the title of this event, Seizing the Means of Publishing, what does seizing the means look like to you in practice? Anyone can jump in first.
Buddy's giving us funding, like, please and thank you. For the love of God, give us funding. Yeah, that would be a great start. Like, I think for writers of color, we're often in this position where we have to like self-fund or rely on like grants, and like there's this false scarcity that not false, because there are so many cuts to the arts, but it feels as if like we have to compete against each other, which I feel like we shouldn't. So yeah, like funding first and foremost, so we can actually do our work and live at the same time. Yeah.
And sometimes it feels like it becomes like a competition for like the funding that's specifically titled for people of color. Like I think a lot of the like programs and grants that are that don't come out specified as for diverse writers or for the creatives from a specific like cultural background, that it doesn't seem particularly accessible to like apply for, and sometimes that feels like discouraging, and then it becomes a matter of like, oh, whose marginalized story is the most important one to tell, which is just not conducive to us thriving in the industry.
Absolutely.
I think that seizing the means a lot of the time means carving out our own spaces, whether in, again, like getting funding for anthologies or programs that center us and our experiences. And there are so many examples of these that have already happened or are happening, like the Growing Up in Australia series that Black Ink Books has published. So like growing up African in Australia, growing up Asian in Australia, growing up Aboriginal, and feature anthologies like Unlimited Features that I'm so excited about, Rafeif. Or publications like Jed Press. It's really it's really encouraging to have these spaces where there are communities that will say, hey, we're here and we will, support you all the way if you are a writer of color.
Yeah, they're all such amazing publications, and like also, I guess, online has sort of made accessibility. I mean, coming back to the concept of funding and capital and all that, because when publishing online it's easier to set up a website. You don't have to put as much money into printing physical copies of things, and it's a lot more accessible to people all over the world. Like, it's not just limited to a particular geographic region. For me, I guess in terms of seizing the means, I was thinking about it from, the whole spectrum of, obviously, I think just like the whole spectrum, like really from like mentoring and sharing resources and like writing communities, I think is a really big part of why I write. Like I love writing alongside each of the three of you and the peers and all the friends I've made along the way. Also, I think there's this question of legitimacy, which is really frustrating to me. Like, I find like there's all this, the books are sort of placed on this pedestal of like, you're only an author or writer if you've published a book. Whereas I think some of the most exciting writing is on Jed Press, is on like Mascara or like Peril, Liminal, like all these amazing organizations that are, they're not just publications, they're like building communities around them. And social media has made such a big difference as well. So that's kind of what I've been thinking about. And I think even just sharing the work of someone you love or just telling them, I think, is a form of, I don't know, it's not like seizing the means of publication, but I think it's a way of changing the landscape, for want of a better word. Yeah, so kind of jumping off the sort of idea of community and care, like how have that kind of been a part of your creative practices? Like, kind of, yeah.
I think for me, like what helped me really like kind of find my creative practice was like working with like communities of artists and through collaboration, because I came from theatre mostly from the start, and then actually did music theatre to start with, which is probably the widest, most capital absorbed industry that you can find out there, in terms of theatre or like live performances. And then I still love musical theatre, but then like coming to find devised, and like collaborative, like experimental theatre making, with other creatives of color, has really helped it feel more like, like less like I was trying to like pursue some form of like individual success alone, which I figured out was not what I valued as a creative anyway. And then kind of, yeah, I think it's really valuable to have those opportunities and spaces to, I don't know, I feel like I kind of like found my people, and then like the art that we made together kind of just made sense and it was safe and we all like had a good time doing it. And it becomes kind of less about we have to win this award or we have to kind of have this level of recognition, because everybody just feels like the art is bringing them together. Yeah.
In terms of communities of care, I really enjoy the aspect of my practice where I'm just hyping everyone I know up. For example, when Shu-Ling's essay collection Echoes was published, I was very much like, oh my gosh, Echoes, everyone read it, it's amazing. It's still amazing. And I just feel inspired by the writers around me, and it's helped me sometimes find different things that I want to write about, and different inspirations that I can draw from, just because let me see, all the support has filled me with warmth, and that kind of energy is just really I guess conducive to a healthy writing practice.
Absolutely. I love that, a healthy writing practice. I think for me, I've been so supported by peers and mentors throughout my entire journey that I can't imagine ever working or writing in isolation or for any sort of individual gain. Like, I think that it's so important that we create work for communities and that we give back and we pay forward, because we have so many amazing individuals who have kind of walked this path before us, who are so generous in giving us their time, like incredible authors like Melissa Lukashenko, Maxine Beneva Clark, Evelyn Arun, like, and so many other like creatives who have done so incredibly and like have just been so generous with their time. I just wanted to mention Overland. Overland is also a publication y'all should like check out. And I think for me, when I came with, I'm gonna just talk about Jet Press for a minute, because I found that as like a community I love, because Jet Press was started with the idea of building a space for First Nations and writers of color on this continent, and like its ethos has always been like own voices and like following like hellish career and fangirling from a distance, and then like sliding into the inbox and being like, hey, can I be published? Maybe, possibly. Was really like really amazing, and just the generosity that you kind of come across when you find other writers of color is just so incredible. Like it's what I love about festivals in general. It's just like all the POC writers hanging out, sharing stories, sharing tips. It's a brilliant time, and I think that we create these spaces because like it's our responsibility, because they're not going to be created for us, and because we owe it to like other emerging writers to pass on the generosity and like the wisdom and support that we also received and are still receiving. Yeah.
I'm so glad you expanded on JetPress, Rafeif, and I really encourage people joining in on this. Viewers, it's so weird like talking to this screen where you can't see your audience. To definitely check out JetPress. Aline has a really amazing short story that was published with JetPress. I guess for me, I think writing groups are quite. So, for example, I was part of West Writers group, which was part of like. That was run through Footscray Community Arts Centre a few years ago, and it was by writers from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. Not by, as in like the members, and I think like there's a lot of generosity in reading one another's drafts and providing feedback. So I've sort of, I guess nowadays I still really enjoy looking at my friends' drafts and just like either hyping them up or providing feedback as well. And really one of the most beautiful experiences I've had this year was working together on a Google Doc together with my friend Dee. So I sent them like a draft of mine where I was just like stuck, and then as I worked out how to edit it, they could see how my mind process was working, and you can like kind of comment down the side, and it just becomes like a conversation rather than like an email back and forth. That was really fun, and I don't know, like I feel like this conversation about seizing the means is about structural change, but I feel like as authors, like beyond authors, like as editors, like Rafeif, I know you edit as well, but then like in terms of like owning publications or like it's just such a huge thing. Like I think just changing who is working within book publishing isn't going to necessarily change the structural problems, which is why I think carving out our own spaces is so critical. And I think it's frustrating when literary prizes are only awarded to books, or they're only awarded to certain genres, and I think that's whole conversation in itself. I kind of want to touch upon sort of if there were kind of key turning points in people's creative careers, or certain like epiphanies when you're just like no, I don't want to, like I don't know, I feel like I don't want to pressure anyone to like just say oh, here's this shit experience that I had, but sometimes it's just I don't know, I just have to vent with my friends at times. Like I think it's important to go into this industry with clear eyes and like have a certain level of cynicism but also hope. And so the sort of tips that you have for kind of navigating the capital I industry and the expectation to constantly produce work of a certain standard.
I guess the first thing I would say, because I wrote my last like personal essay / memoir piece in 2019, and I swore I would never write another because it just like broke me. I think just know that your story is your own, and the measure of success is your own. It's not external, and that like as people of color, we're expected to share our tragedies and triumphs on the page, and that's unfair and dehumanizing. You can share as much or as little as you want, and you shouldn't think that you have to write memoir like as your first entry point to be valid. It's literally why I'm focusing on speculative fiction, because I love speculative fiction. It explores everything I would want to explore in a memoir, just in a different genre that doesn't mean that I need to see my psych every week. So shout out to my psych, who I appreciate and love. Yeah, you know, there aren't safety nets for writers of color when we have to like do this really deep work. So I guess be careful and have your support network around you for when you do that work, because it brings up things and it takes a toll, and it's more labor than you will get paid for. So yeah, that's my sort of sad, unhelpful advice, but it's yeah.
It's such a like tricky. Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
I was just gonna say, such a tricky balance to find as well, because like, you know, like on the one hand, you know that there's like people from your community, especially like kind of like younger folks, that would love to read work that they can see themselves in, that is, you know, like nonfiction and memoir based. But then like on the other hand, it's kind of like where you choose to put that story, or like who is interested in that story, is often, yeah, like you said, Rafeif, like you're putting yourself in a position that's really vulnerable. And that story, it's like, how do you know, like you're never sure that that's going to be handled with care necessarily. Yeah, like I did my thesis last year on Asian Australian life writing, and whether or not we should, I guess broader POC authors in general, like if we should keep writing like based on our own lives. And I remember, like, I've forgotten who said this, but in one of my like resources that I looked at, like the person was like analyzing like diaspora literature from Chinese women who had moved to America, or Canada or Australia, because she was using those three as like examples of like migrant countries that people move to. And then there being this huge kind of like uptick in interest for cultural revolution stories of like, oh, like tell us how you survived this, like tell us about the trauma. And what she had said was that like if you had gone back and actually like looked into these women's lives, you would find that most of these Chinese women are more like Bridget Jones than Madame Mao. And I just said that just like stuck with me, because it's like, well, yeah, like what angle are you looking at that at? And I feel like most of the time, like when I write work that is based on my own experiences, like I feel like people from my community never look at it as like, oh, this is a Chinese Australian story, or like this is like a migrant story. It's like, no, like this is Cindy's story, like this is Cindy talking about their life. Whereas I feel like oftentimes when you like hand that to a white audience, it's kind of like, oh, like you're so brave and inspirational for sharing your story. I'm like, no, I'm just, this is who I am, you know, like don't trivialize it. But yeah, like that balance I find is really hard to like decide on when you choose to kind of let that story out into the world. Yeah.
Was it Pavan in on Boba Activism who said, "I just want to write dumb stuff"?
Yeah.
Your haircuts. That struck such a chord with me. I think in the end, you really want to write just what you want to write, and it really it shouldn't matter whether it's to a super high standard. Like it has to be. I feel as if there's this pressure for writers of color to always produce something completely amazing because we won't be recognized or published otherwise. And I feel as if we should let go of that sort of load a bit and focus on what we do want to write, whether what's it called, whether it is our trauma or I don't know, a haircut that we that we didn't like, because there will be people who will back you, I think, and there is a whole community behind you that's just waiting to hype you up.
Yeah, and I mean, I was going to say to Rafeif, I don't think that was unhelpful advice. I thought it was very helpful advice. And I love that you both work in speculative fiction, because I think there's so much possibilities within that genre, and like a very, very huge history behind it too, which I think is a whole nother panel in itself. But just kind of curious, I guess as has anyone ever experienced imposter syndrome? I know this is a bit of a left field question, but yeah, I mean, like
all the time.
Yeah, still in it.
Right this minute, like
right now.
Yep.
Please don't feel busted. But I think it is important to take time away from the spotlight. So in 2018, I wrote an essay called Through the Looking Glass, which was published in Mianjin, and it got a lot of attention. It was shortlisted for a prize. Then I applied and was selected for 2 writing residencies. So 2018 was this weird year where I felt a lot of pressure on me, where I felt like I have to capitalize at this moment. If I don't get a book deal this year, everyone's going to forget about me, or like, I have to strike the iron while it's hot. And I don't know, that pressure was there. And I think, I don't know quite, in terms of explaining how I got through it, I mean, 2019, I just decided to create out of the spotlight. I decided to just experiment for myself, not submit to any prizes, try poetry, and yeah, really just take that time away to create away from the spotlight, which I think having a day job meant that I could do that. Like I could afford to I didn't have to write for my living. Like I was able to, just step back for a bit. And I'm paraphrasing Ocean Vuong here, but he wrote a story the other day on Instagram about how, a lot of writing is the soil, like tending to soil, and like everyone focuses on the flower, which is like the end product, but actually tending to your soil is a huge part of what it means to be a creative person. But yeah, I don't know, I guess imposter syndrome is a thing, and it comes and goes. But I think you're amazing.
And you're amazing. I love that the idea of taking time to create away from the spotlight without the pressure of producing work and entering prizes. Like I think that's a really incredible way of like navigating a system that kind of just wants us to produce. Like
Yeah, I think they interrupt someone. No, sorry, I'm hearing voices. No, I super relate to like what you said, Shu-Ling, about like the year that you had in 2018, because like in 2019, like was when I made like my first like full length like performance work, and it was like devised and collaborative, and we like took it to the Fringe, and like it got like a lot of attention from the community, and like we got like nominated for like the category prize. And then like after that, because the pandemic came right after that, and then I think I spent so much of the time last year being like, oh, like is this like, am I a one-hit wonder? Like is this like what, you know what I mean? Like is everything else I make from here on going to try to measure up to that? And then I think it took me almost like the whole year to be like to like reflect on like why it is that I was feeling all of this like anxiety about never producing something that was, I don't know, I guess like conventionally seen as successful again, like because I guess it would have been seen that way because we like sold out like the seeds and like people said good things about it. But then also like thinking back on it, it's like all of the like, I don't know, like joy and growth that I experienced from like creating that. It's like that's not going to leave. And if I can figure out that I'm not trying to become this, you know, like super famous, super successful, rich person, but I don't know, I often find that imposter syndrome kind of comes into because of that, because you feel like you're in this industry and because you've gotten some attention that, oh, like I'm not that super successful person and I feel like I should be. And at least for me, like that's where my imposter syndrome comes from. And then like figuring out that like what I actually like gained and like value from the work that I create, then it's like, oh, actually you don't need to be in the spotlight all the time. Like you said, like you just make the work that makes you happy and that you want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's pressure to like your next piece has to be better than the previous piece. And I think when I realized that actually no, it can just be as good or just different, I think that was a pretty important understanding for myself. I guess I kind of want to talk about hope because I didn't want this just to be a super cynical thing. I mean, I guess it can be super cynical too, because I think it's important to be honest, I guess. Like sometimes no one hands you this handbook about how to be a writer. And I think it's additional barriers and additional considerations as a person of color working with predominantly white editors at times who may want to push a particular angle on your pieces. But I guess, yeah, hope is a pretty important thing. Like obviously we're all still creating and all part of our various communities. What kind of gives you hope?
Let me see. I wanted to mention another writers group. There's the African literature, what was it? The African Literature Development Program that's Westwards in Western Sydney runs, which was, which was created by the African Australian Advocacy Centre, and I was part of it last year. It was basically like, well, because of COVID, it wasn't just writers from Western Sydney. It was writers from all across the continent who were just sort of in this writers group and hyping each other up and just being really supportive. And we also had the incredible privilege of having Maxine Beneba Clark sit into one of our sessions and sort of, I think it was an advice giving or a general session where we could ask her anything or something like that. And a program like that gives me a lot of hope because there are a lot of voices in the African Australian community that deserve to be heard, and initiatives like that are just really, really nice and inspiring.
Maxine is like one of the most generous writers, like working on this continent. Yeah, I admire her so much, and she's also been really, really influential and to my early career as a writer. Like I'm gonna misquote it now, and I feel like I'm under pressure. But like this is in Foreign Soil, in the acknowledgement, there's like a line about thank you to the feet that paved the way for Maxine, and hopefully she can also pave the way for others, and she is.
Absolutely. Can we have like a Maxine Beneba Clark stamp panel? Like in a festival? Is that possible?
I feel like we've already picked so many. Yeah. Yeah. I think like okay, sorry. Like being able to like find other people who are also doing the same thing and kind of just slide into their DMs and be like, hey, you want to hang out and talk about writing? Because it's, you know, like, yeah, and I always find that like the POC writers like in our communities are so generous with their like time with emerging writers. Like I was a huge fan of Shu-Ling's work before I met her. I literally just slid into her DMs and was like, "Hey, I really like your work." And you know, like I feel like going back to like carving our own spaces thing, it's kind of like, you know, I feel like just like we can just do that, you know. I feel like there's this misconception that we have to like have it set up in some way and like get into this part of an industry, or like go to like this, you know, be a part of, I don't know, this company, or like be published by this organization, when we can just, yeah, I don't know, like it gives me a lot of hope to know that we all are kind of like building this community together. We can just reach out, you know, like there's no kind of war there. Yeah.
That you want to add?
Because we're moving away from like this set hierarchy, we're going to a space where everyone's really, really like equal and generous, and yeah, like you said, Cindy, there's no barriers. So like I would highly encourage emerging writers to just email or slide into the DMs, if the DMs are open, of like the writers that they admire, and ask for advice. Like folks can be so kind that it's and I think it's because, yeah, we're building a community based on like shared values and ethics and beliefs, and we all want it to work, rather than something that's just created to create financial capital. Actually, I saw a question in the chat that I would really love to ask. It's what do your parents think about your work? Do your parents read your work?
I saw this coming.
Do you want to answer first?
Yeah, I'll answer first. My parents have been low-key but also high-key trying to discourage me from writing for the longest time, while also simultaneously supporting me unconditionally. They'll be like, "Oh, Aline, you should study psychology." And I'll be like, no, I don't want to. And then the next minute they'll be like, "Oh, Aline, we should self-publish this thing that you wrote when you were in 3rd grade." And I'll be like, okay. And they'll be like, "Right, so it's published now." So I think that my parents see a lot of me in my work when they do read my work. Or sometimes they'll be like, "Oh, you spelled this word in Kinyarwanda wrong." And I'll be like, "Well, it's published now. I can't do anything about that."
Oh, I love that. The high-key discouraging, but also unconditionally supportive. That's like so beautiful.
My mum was similar too. She'd be like, "You've used the word, you've repeated this phrase several times in a row," and she's like, you know, mix it around. And I'm like, "It's deliberate, Mum." And I go through my draft looking for factual inaccuracies, which I think is really cute. I don't share my work. Well, actually, no. I have written about sex in the past. A lot of my earlier work was on sex, and my mum's read 1 or 2, and then there's a couple I've just not shown her, which is interesting because I am really proud of those pieces, and I know they're really important pieces. I hate it when people say that work is so important because, anyway, baggage. Where was I going with this? Oh, yeah. And so I just kind of like in the future, if I do write a full-length, you know, collection and include those essays in there, because they're, you know, critical to my development as a person and a writer. I'm just like, I don't know how to hide them from her, because I can't be like, "Don't read that section," because then she'll know. She knows what it's about. But I think, yeah, we were chatting before about how my publisher decided to no longer print my book Echoes, which is like a whole story in itself, which I probably won't go into right now. But if people want to ask me about it. I'm sure I can maybe tell you some stuff. Anyway, my mum's like, she was such a huge, she just backs me all the way. She's like, you don't need them. Just publish your book yourself. And I just pulled out this box of zines that I have. And she's like, these zines are beautiful. She's like, just make zines. So I'm like, yeah. And I love that she's, super practical.
Yeah, my family's on. I really relate to that because that show that I made in 2019 was entirely about queer Asian sex. And my whole extended family came to one of the nights and they all sat in the front row, and the show has audience interaction. So my uncle got a condom thrown at him. He had a great time. But it's just very, it's like almost detached in a way when it's theater. But yeah, like I super relate to that. I'm like, because I also write a lot about like bodies and sensuality and like sex, and like I'm just gonna show you all the family related ones. But also like maybe that's also just me not like making an assumption that they wouldn't enjoy it or like wouldn't support it. But yeah, no, like I think my parents are like very supportive. They want me to do a master's degree, like always. Like every time I call my mom, she's like, "What are you doing your master's in publishing and editing?" I'm like, I don't know. She's like, you should, if you love it so much, you should do a degree in it. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah. About that. Yeah. But it's nice. They're just caring in their very Asian parent caring way. It's nice, but
this is so wholesome.
Tell us about your poet father. And I'm sure your mum too.
Yes, my parents are both creatives in their own way. So my dad's a playwright and poet, and my mum is like a singer and composer, which means I'm really, really lucky because, they were super excited for me to do creative things, and I've just been doing theatre and writing and all forms of storytelling since I was really young. I don't actually like sharing my work with them when it's in its draft stage because I can't handle the feedback from them. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a Leo. I can't handle constructive criticism. It's just I can't handle the feedback from them until it's a bit more polished. But my parents do. Like my dad especially looks through my poems and is like, are you sure this is what you meant to say in Arabic? And I'm like, yes, I am absolutely sure this is what I meant to say. And I think for them at the moment, me publishing my novel would be like the highlight for them. So for them, it's like, when is the novel gonna get done? At some point, I have a day job. I don't know about y'all, but like when you write and then you have like your day job and other things to balance, it's just so hard to carve out that space. But it's also like important to carve out that space. So I take about 3 to 4 hours, like every day, even if it's like half an hour on the train to work and half an hour back, and then 15 minutes here and there just to like jot things down. And how do you guys navigate that, like if you're balancing work and writing and everything?
I work 4 days a week, and the writing was a big decision to move from 5 to 4 days a week, and I don't write all day. Like I'm a very undisciplined writer. I tend to write a lot. Like I tend to write late at night. One thing I did find helpful is when I am able to take 2 weeks off from work, like I find like I can kind of really get in the zone a lot more. So like just I took the first 2 weeks of September off, and I happened to have a really rough draft and a chunk of notes ready to go, and I could just spend a week smashing out that essay that I wanted to do. That's kind of how I navigate it, either really late at night on a weekend or trying to get like residencies or just take a chunk of time off from work. Not exciting.
I'm new to working the 9 to 5, so I'm still trying to establish a writing routine. I think that I'll try to write for an hour over the on like a Saturday at the moment, just because my day job is slightly demanding. So I tend to get really exhausted during the week. But we'll see how we go. I've been somehow able to produce work anyway. Not sure how. It seems like I'm never writing. But yeah, it's a learning journey.
Yeah, I work like casually, so I think I usually like have the flexibility to be like, oh, I'm not working today, I can do this. I'm not working today, I can do this. And now because I'm not working at all, I get to spend all of my time not writing. Yeah, but I don't know. Like I feel like I'm a very like chaotic person in the sense that like I really struggle with like disciplining myself to be like, today I'm gonna get this amount of work done. And because so much of my work is like technically non-fiction, that sometimes it does take me like, you know, listening to the same sad song on repeat, like rocking on my knees in a corner crying for 3 days before I get the poem out, because I need to get to that state. So it's very like, you know, like I used to like when work was quiet, I used to like, if I like had something that I wanted to write down, I would like write it on the back of the receipt under the table. I'm still employed, so we're good. Yeah, I think it's just like I just try to like find I don't know, it's less like I'm looking for time to write than like the idea is like do it now, and like okay, I'm doing something else right now, but okay, I'll write it down, and then have days of nothing. Yeah, so I feel like that like balance and like routine is still something that I'm trying to find, but also that it doesn't necessarily need to be, I don't know, like I found that like it feels most like good to my body to like do things in my own time. Yeah, don't really have an answer, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it's something.
Sorry, I just wanted to point out that Aline is being published in Africa Risen, which is edited by like Shui Ray Thomas. So you have produced something and have done an amazing thing. This is like, if you're a speculative fiction fan, especially an Afro-speculative fiction fan, you would know how big of a deal this is to all of the audience. Like, this is a really big deal. So huge congratulations. Like, you are literally part of the history that we all study now. And you have produced work. So super proud of you.
Thank you. I'm so excited for Africa Risen. It'll be published sometime next year, just like Unlimited Futures.
Yes.
We have a joint launch party.
Yes, we will have a launch party for Africa Risen and Unlimited Futures.
So definitely something, for like two huge things to look forward to for 2022. I feel like that's kind of a nice place to wrap up our conversation. And it's been very, very free-flowing and unstructured, but it's been lots of fun. And I do want to, thanks Rafeif, Aline, and Cindy for all your beautiful conversation today. And I am so glad that we're friends and can, you know, continue these conversations going forward, and fingers crossed hang out at the next NYWF. That's kind of where I want to leave it. And I guess kind of slide into our DMs if you've got
Absolutely. Just hit us up if you have any questions. And thank you, Shu-Ling, for being an amazing chair and friend, and just for your existence. your entire existence. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.